UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Wow, what a catchy tune. I love that. Welcome to UAP Crossfire, where four alpha males go at it, try to find out the biggest question in the universe. Are we alone, or are we just with Don Eckert? One of the two. And stuff. Well, here we go for another. And this is going to be an exciting show, folks, because we have a trial attorney that's going to be coming on shortly. And I know guys on this group are going to kind of beat him up a little bit, but he's tough. He's a good man. I like him.
I object.
All right, you can't have an objection. Nothing's been said yet.
Yeah, you said you indicated that I was going to try to beat up the guest. That is not going to happen.
Okay, verbally challenge him.
I will not be verbally
badgering the host. Badgering the host.
All right, yeah. There you go. Objection. Badgering the host, for God's sakes.
Chris, all you got to say is, you sons of bitches.
Don't act like a pork chop, for God's sakes, and stuff. All right. Well, listen, I want to introduce my co-host here. First, our spiritual leader, and boy, do we need one. That's Dan the Padre Carlson.
Good evening.
And, of course, he doesn't like to be called an expert, but I think he's an expert, and he's very knowledgeable that anything that flies in the air, he's our good friend, and I think the best of him is Commander Cobra. Hello, Commander. How are you?
Good evening, gentlemen. It's great to be with you tonight.
I didn't get a chance for Padre to say something. I just cut him off because I'm going to save him for a little later.
You're that kind of guy, Chris. That's all.
Oh, I'm a pork chop. I know it. Yes. And of course, here's the mystery of the universe himself. My good friend. I love this guy, especially when he gets all riled up. Dandy Don Eckert. I like that Dandy Don Eckert. How are you, Don?
Ooh, Dandy Don. I like that.
Well, I'll tell you. How am I? Actually, I've had my ups and my downs of late. But
how's the puppy?
Well, the puppy is, she's doing a lot better. Can't wait to get her back to the vets. Want to get those the staples removed as soon as we can. But look, I was excited about tonight's show, tonight's guest. I had been up to the Roswell event, incident, whatever the hell happened there, to my eyebrows for 35, 36 years. Now, I know and knew all the principals, the investigators. Stanton Friedman, of course, one of the big ones. Dr. Kevin Randall, PhD, all right? And his partner in this case, Don Schmidt. Paul Davids, the film producer, movie producer, very deeply into the case himself, that did the movie Roswell with Kyle MacLachlan back in around 95 or so. Now, we covered at UFO Magazine, my wife, myself, covered that case to the nth degree. I've been down to Roswell a couple of times. Actually, had a couple of adventures down there. But one of the people that I literally ran into, and it was a hell of a story, was an actual participant from the Roswell Army Air Force Base, a World War II vet, a guy that was in T Squadron. That was, according to his testimony, because I flew down to Texas to interview this guy after I met him in Roswell. That's another whole story. He disappeared in Roswell. I literally had to do, and I did, a police investigation to track him down. At that time in Roswell, there were two UFO museums.
Hey, Danny Don, can we bring the guest on?
Hey, don't ask me. I'm not running this show.
Well, yeah, you asked to talk beforehand. I'm just being courteous to you. You're going to finish up what you're saying, then I'll bring
I
the
am.
guest on.
By God, I am going to finish up what I'm saying.
Now, here we go. I knew that was wrong. Commander, why'd you get him going? It's
anyway,
in the show.
That's like saying the sun rose in the east. How'd you do that, Commander? It happens every day.
So anyway, I flew down there, met him, interviewed him for an hour and a half. He was one of the first-hand witnesses that told me he saw 4 bodies. 3 of them were dead. One of them was still alive when he was out there cleaning up the debris field. Now, okay, he gave me a gift. He had carved, Bill, if you want to flash them now, he had carved me these little figures, all right? He said that's what, he called them the moon men. He said that's what the moon men looked like, all right? Now,
Like
when
Mr.
97 rolled around, everybody at that time was pins and needles about the Air Force report, okay? I had been contacted by a half a dozen news shows at UFO Magazine with several of them being national. That night, I was on NBC Nightly News, okay? I did MSNBC. This was before they totally went off the cliff, and several other shows. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember anymore what they all were. But we were all waiting for the Air Force to release this report. Okay, the Roswell report, case closed. Nobody got a copy of it, which I thought was kind of odd. Before the Air Force spokesman, it was some colonel, gave his briefing to the press, nobody had seen anything. Now, when we got it, this was still in the document. Let me read this to you. And this told me a hell of a lot. Embargo. Hold for release. The attached material, he's talking about this, is designed for use in conjunction with the Roswell report, case closed. This is a total embargo. Material must be held for release until 2 p.m. Eastern Time on June 24th, 1997. Until release, none of this material may be paraphrased, hinted at, or alluded to in any way. This material may not be moved by the wire services or any other news media. This material must not be discussed with or provided to others who have not accepted the package on an embargoed basis. Now, that seems kind of draconian, doesn't it? A little draconian. There's nothing in this report, top secret, purportedly. And why would they do that? Well, I put my little detective hat on after I got my copy, and I came to, I think, some pretty good conclusions. Number one.
Hey, Don, can we bring the guest on?
Daddy, are we there yet, Daddy?
Chill,
Yeah.
dude. Chill. So anyway.
What did I tell you?
So anyway, I went through this report. And I'll just be very, very blunt. I know this is going to surprise you, Commander Cobra. No, blunt.
Okay.
This is the biggest crock of manure
I'm so
I
used to
have
you
seen.
sugarcoating it. I had the insulin syringe here at the counter.
Okay.
But I won't use it since you're going to be blunt and I hope brief so the guest can come on and hear this and interact with it.
Hey, this is a fucking 2-hour show, Cobra. Okay? So anyway, here we are with this report. The stuff in here was amazing. Now, I don't know if it's in the one you found the PDF copy of, but for example, that colonel stood up in front of the press. Nobody had seen this report yet. Showed that, okay? And
That's from
he
Lost in
said words.
Space.
He said words along the, well, you know, if I was out driving around by Rio de la Rosa or some damn place, I don't know where it was, in New Mexico, and I saw that, well, I'd stop and I'd get out and I might poke around at it a little bit, see what the hell it is. Yeah, no shit. You know why? This was a space probe from 1972, and they were trying to pass it off as something back in 47.
Let's ask that.
Then, one more thing, and then I'll shut up, I promise. Then they tried to explain the bodies that witnesses knew. Remember, I found a guy that saw the bodies. You just saw the little carvings he made for me. I listened to them try to explain that from 1954 anthropomorphic dummies being dropped from extreme height, okay? And somehow it got convoluted to 1947. These guys, well, it's obvious they had no respect for the intelligence of the American public. This is as bogus as, well, I'm not going to say that because this is purportedly a family show. But with that,
I think that went down the crapper a long time ago.
With that, I'm going to shut up now.
Okay.
Commander Cobra, bring on the guest.
Yeah, I'll bring on the guest now. Christopher Johnston is a recognized trial attorney and certified civil trial specialist with over 2 decades of litigation experience. An 8-time recipient of the Super Lawyer Distinction and member of the $1 Million Advocates Forum. I think I got to hire this guy. Chris has successfully argued cases before the Iowa Supreme Court and has built a reputation as a fierce advocate and legal thinker. Beyond the courtroom, Chris is a founding member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance and is also a lifelong ufologist with a background in astrobiology, a lawyer with astrobiology, and space law. Ooh, okay. He has earned a certificate in space law through the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. I didn't know the United Nations had that. That'll be an interesting question. Bridging the gap between scientific inquiry and legal accountability in the expanding domain of space exploration. Chris is contributing member of MUFON. He has authored multiple articles for the MUFON Journal, including the Infratempestrial Hypothesis. I don't know what that is, but it's well above my pay grade. It's an exploration of ancient terrestrial intelligences and their role in shaping humanity's understanding of the UFO phenomena. Chris's debut book, Roswell, The Truth on Trial, reimagines the legendary 1947 UFO crash as a jury trial complete with opening statements, witness testimonies, and closing arguments, placing the reader in the role of the juror. Chris brings a rare blend of legal expertise, scientific courtesy, and investigative rigor to the conversation around UAP disclosure, making him a powerful voice who stands at the intersection of law, science, and the unexplained. And welcome, Christopher Johnston.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I don't know if you still want to be on the show, but let's give it a try. Go ahead, Commander.
I just want to ask one quick opening legal question, if you don't mind, sir. Would you put Decker as a hostile witness? Sorry, I just felt it was necessary to let the air out of that balloon.
Yeah,
balloons will come up later on. Decker, did you see what I did there? Did you see how I brought in the balloon aspect? See how I did that?
Are you going to take the role of defense attorney or prosecutor?
Oh, well, in my real life, I'm a plaintiff attorney. So in a civil case, which this would be, those would be the believers. So I'll be on the side of the believers.
All right, because we'll talk about the Roswell report a little later, and then Decker can tear that thing apart. How's that?
Okay.
All right, because I love to hear that. I'm going to get popcorn and soda for that one.
We bring
All
Decker
right.
in when we're awarding the amount of the
Hey,
award.
don't go easy on him. He's my friend. I love him. He's the best. He's the best.
We're all
right, hey,
friends
listen.
here, and I believe Chris, at the end of this night, this baptism tonight, will be amongst the pantheon of friends of this show.
Oh, he'll just say, I'm not going to get on with those pork chops again. I'll stay with John B. Wells. I mean, he's a lot easier than these three.
I had stopped at home before I came back to the office, and I was telling my wife about the format of this, and I was kind of going, oh, my God. And she goes, Chris, that's how, so you guys know, at the appellate level, when you're arguing at the Court of Appeals or at a state Supreme Court or feds, this is what happens. You get 2 minutes into your argument, and you get the justices. Hey,
yeah, but the justices don't swear at you, and they don't call you a son of a bitch.
That's what I tried to tell her.
Son of a bitch! I know you're lying. Your lips are moving.
Right.
Oh boy.
So,
all right. Well, listen. I first want to open up this question, then we'll go round table. The certified trial specialist and eight-time super lawyer. You tried all these cases. You're like a big-time lawyer. How'd you get involved with ufology? I mean, you bring it up to other lawyers. Do they kind of go, you know?
Well, kind of in reverse order. I'm reached that point. I'm 55 years old. I've got grown kids. I've got my own business. So if people want to look askance at me, more power to them. I don't care. But it was, as we were kind of talking about beforehand with Stanton Friedman getting, really breaking over the Roswell stuff in the 70s. I was born in 69, and my dad was a science fiction UFO guy before it was hip and cool. And so, some kids would go fishing, some kids would play baseball. Honestly, with my dad, it was, Christopher, watch this creepy UFO show to me. Come lay on the roof and look at these stars, and everything that moves, I'm going to tell you is a UFO. So that's really where it started. And, then it just kind of stuck with me, and I developed kind of my own sub-interests, within the category, if you will. And it stayed with me, and, and life happens, and kids move out, and suddenly you have tremendous amounts of free time, and you can actually get back into your passions.
Anyway, why you didn't become an astronomer or something like that? I mean... I honestly, I don't have the brains for that kind of, atmospheric calculus, and you're just the math and science behind it. I very much, I'm a word guy, I'm a trial lawyer. So those areas are huge interest, but, to go to university and, coursework would not be for me. All right, let me turn it over to Commander, because I think Commander has some good questions for you.
Well, Chris, explain to everybody what the legal analysis to this means. I mean, as I told you with my Perry Mason rerun preparation for this show, many, many nights of watching the reruns of the show, reviewing some notes from my military JAG orientation course. Explain to the audience what it means to look at evidence and put it together, and especially from the standpoint that you believe your client is true in this case, which would be, the equivalent of innocent.
Sure. And so I'll step back just a second, because when I put the book together, so when folks read it, they'll see I took this altruistic position, no sides, no opinions. And so I got to put the lawyer hat back on. And as an attorney, regardless of who your client is or what the matter is, if you've been retained and you're representing them, we are to be zealous advocates for our clients. Every lawyer knows that phrase. So in a situation like this, and obviously it would be a mock trial. It couldn't happen for, a million different reasons. But procedurally, I thought, well, wouldn't it be slick if we could have, let's face it, we don't see new info on Roswell coming in every day, week, month, decade, what have you. So I thought, one of my personal pet peeves is people that lack critical thinking, or they'll read a headline or in the subline and not get any deeper into it. So that's one of the great things about trial work and trials themselves. You've got your direct exam. I call a witness, direct exam. Here's my persuasive questions to lay out the story how I want it, followed immediately by the cross exam, of, in this case, would be the defense attorney. So to take old evidence and lay out both sides of it side by side, and I intentionally selected witnesses who are a little bit, not necessarily down the middle, but could be picked apart. And that was, for a reason in the book. But to be able to put it in front of there and have someone ask those hard questions that, we may or may not think of, that's one of the fantastic things about trial work. I'll get surprised on occasion with a question the defense comes up with that, wow, that's an interesting angle. So, Commander, I may not have actually directly answered your question, but I'm trying here. Am I sniffing around the right spot anyway?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So in a civil trial, in every kind of trial, but this being a civil trial, one side has what's called the burden of proof. And so that's why us plaintiff lawyers will tell you the plaintiff lawyer always has the harder job, because we are the ones that have to prove something. The defense lawyers, the intellectually honest ones, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, my job's a hell of a lot easier than the plaintiff guys. All they have to do is sit and poke a hole, make a dent, get a couple of drips of water going, and suddenly it's no longer reasonable. So a case like this would be great if we could put it together, the real thing. It would take months and months and years if we were to call the correct witnesses and could actually get our hands on any physical evidence. Could you imagine? But to have it all in one place and condensed under some formal rules, it's a good way to view anything, I think. And then also, like in my book, there's the section on deliberations. And I have, we lawyers have all kinds of rules that we follow. And so I took what are called jury instruction guides on how the judge will instruct the jury on how to weigh evidence and certain things to look for bias. Well, is there compensation involved? Is there this? Is there that? So not only do I lay out both sides side by side, immediately, then there's even a guide to help. Hey, well, okay, Jesse Marcel, what are the pros and cons? I have charts for each witness just to get people kind of thinking on both sides of that. To ultimately, again, come back to, and it sounds trite a little bit, but if one person ever looks at some information a little bit sideways that they otherwise would have just bought hook, line, and sinker before they read my book, perfect. Mission accomplished.
One quick redirect to you, sir.
I like that redirect.
With your new expansion into this area in the book, are you getting involved in related legal activities in the UFO UAP world that we're in now? Trying to get more information, not just Roswell, but other activities.
Yeah, that's kind of there's really two prongs to that, Commander. There's the UFO UAP side of things and FOIAs and Danny Sheehan's of the world. And then there's also the more legalese space law category where you're dealing with insurance products and, the Padres satellite crashes into, Don's satellite, who pays, and that kind of thing. So there's that, and I do some work in that realm. On the other side of things, currently what I'm doing, it was mentioned in my intro, I've written a handful of articles now for MUFON, and each one of them has taken that kind of a similar, the last one I did, for example, was on disinformation agents. Right? And I didn't name names or anything, but I took the legalese of, hey, well, what is a disinformation agent? What are some of the red flags? I'm trying to take this educational bent, to what I'm doing.
So you didn't mention Doty at all?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, and I'm all off my patter. Where are we?
About disinformation agents.
Right. So, just going back to Commander's question, as far as if I'm involved. So I'm involved to the extent of doing a fair amount of writing, fair amount of research. I'm working on my next book, that's coming out. I've been contacted on a handful of FOIA issues, but really there's certain things where, it's helpful to be an attorney and you can make certain things happen, but FOIA appeals, I'm really not going to have much better luck at it than Commander's going to have with it. Now, Danny Sheehan, who I mentioned, I'm sure most of you know, if not all of you, he's running the Paradigm Institute out there in DC. And in the world of attorneys and UAPs and disclosure, he's really tip of the spear as far as I'm concerned. He's right down the street from Congress. He's got lobbyists on the payroll. He's got, legislative aides on the payroll. So they are actually crafting bills regarding disclosure that are then literally being trotted right on down to the Capitol. So there's, a lot of attorneys involved in that respect. And then one thing that doesn't come up a lot, since we're on the topic, I want to mention it. Typically, for evidence to be admissible in a courtroom, especially scientific kind of evidence, so Chris has a stream in his backyard and it's got a 10-legged frog back there and he's telling everybody about it. And eventually an expert will come and they'll take the frog and they'll do the test. Now we've got this environmental tort kind of case. Well, what we're seeing now in those types of cases, and so I think it also is going to apply to UFO, UAP topics, is a category called citizen evidence, where now it's still, if it's new and novel, is a fairly high standard, but now Chris can go and he can pick up his frog and Padre can go get his, weird bird with the 5 heads, and it's citizen evidence, and they're accepting that chain of custody where Padre could go, yes, I caught it on this branch of my tree. And so now it's a more efficient way of rounding up evidence that previously wouldn't even been looked at because Padre found it, who cared? So, but now we're starting to gain traction. So to my point on that is that type of evidence gets more and more accepted in the courts. Okay, well, now what are we going to do about, hey, well, there was this, alleged landing and here's these radiation readings and we can prove it. We can start, compiling it into what may actually turn into admissible evidence in a real case.
Padre.
Boy, I have a whole page of questions here. It's hard for me to know where to start. But one has to do with, you mentioned space law. Yep. I've got a son going into Space Force, and I'm curious what exactly, you kind of alluded to satellites crashing into each other, but what are the boundaries? What sorts of things would a space law expert be doing? What kinds of cases?
Sure. Like I said, currently, most people, and I wouldn't hold myself out as a space law lawyer. I am involved in some space law. But typically, again, you're going to have, I have a close friend who is a space law attorney, and his whole world is insurance. And Lloyd's of London, and these big writers who write for these quirky kinds of, risk, if you will. And so in that kind of work, you are defending policies. And frankly, this is kind of an interesting time to get into it because of a lot of these insurance tools are being created right now because this is such a new area. So they're bringing in different people going, hey, how does this work and what should this look like as we move ahead? So a lot of lawyers are involved in that end of it. And then the other big chunk would be in the defense, national defense kind of thing. A lot of them in the employ of the government, the satellites, the locations, the determining who's got what orbital rights, all those sorts of things, the secret technologies in those. So it's really classified. You kind of have, again, your civil guys, right, like me, but doing the insurance on space law. And then you're more, not necessarily military, but absolute guaranteed Space Force as a big slug of space law attorneys as well. I've actually looked.
So with that, like risk management and insurance and identifying things like that. I was listening to another program earlier in the week about the way that the space program expands, private space programs are advancing exponentially. And one concern is that we've become so risk averse that there's so many layers you have to go through to get anything going. And that may, in fact, be hampering us in our civil space programs. Is space law just another bump in the road, or are there ways to streamline it? What's your view on that?
It's such a huge, again, we'll go using the insurance example. I mean, an absolutely colossal amount of money at stake, first of all, for the third party, the folks, as well as the insurance companies.
Well,
could things be streamlined? Yes. Now, and understand, Padre, I don't know exactly the processes they're going for, but given the weight and gravity, no pun intended, of the situation. I don't know that it really is something that I would want streamlined. And I'm fairly I'm okay with risk, especially for an attorney, but boy, interestingly, here's how you streamline it. I participated in this competition with NASA, and they wanted people to extrapolate anything space for the next 30 years. Okay? So what I did was I compared and contrasted terrestrial tourism, right, going back to the Egyptians and the Grand Rounds and this kind of thing, and then Sir Thomas Cook with his travel packages in the 1800s. That's when travel really became into vogue, when it was affordable to the common person. Okay. So now I took the next 30 years and I said, well, I kind of compared chunks of time. So if you want to know when things are going to get streamlined, it's when the first ship goes up with a bunch of folks like us and we all get smoked. Then people are going to then it'll be an issue and things, will start moving along. But as it is right now with only the ultra wealthy, right? Let's say, God forbid, Bezos goes up, he gets blown up. All us normal people are going to go, oh, super rich guy, it's one guy, right? It's going to be once it's more commonplace for the rest of us. And
I think the mini sub's a really good example of what you just said.
The what?
The mini sub that went down the Titanic, I can't remember its name. I mean, it's a perfect example of in a terrestrial sense. I mean, critical people to the banking industry, the whole thing looked like a pretty suspect setup from start to finish, but it went away pretty quickly.
It did.
And I know that the point isn't comparing the environments necessarily, but right, in a submarine, and you can only imagine that's one little thing, a speck on the bottom of the ocean that really isn't going to interfere. If we all built a sub and we're buzzing around, odds that we're going to interfere with something aren't probably going to be that big of a deal. But if we're all making satellites and rockets and Padre's shooting his up and Don's got his going, or it's going to be worse than it is with space debris, which is another hot topic of mine. But, as it is right now, Padre, I think that the caution is necessary to the extent of my knowledge.
Okay, so one more question. This is going to go right into Don, because I know this is an area that he is very into. It's the infratempestrial hypothesis. You want to, you do when you clean it up. But anyway, can you tell me a bit about that? And Don, I'll let you take it next.
Sure. So what that is, I'm sure all of you're at least somewhat familiar with Dr. Masters and his extratempestrial hypothesis. All right, anyone? So, his whole take, hey, the current extraterrestrials are us, but they're on a different timeline, and then they time travel back to check on us. That's his theory. An extratempestrial means beyond us in time. So when I first heard his theory, I thought, that's pretty cool. It's something new, newish bits and pieces, and I really liked it. And so, I read some of his work. And as you said in my intro, I've done certificate work in astrobiology, and I wouldn't hold myself out as an astrobiologist. But when I started reading Masters, theory, and one of the things that he does is he lays out, okay, if the six of us, we go to, Alpha Centauri for 1 million years because of their environment, we're going to, grow the big heads and the black guys and this and that. And so he goes through, and it was a pretty neat layout on how we would evolve that way. So I know enough about astrobiology to have some insight into what the environment and the atmosphere was on Earth 3.5 billion years ago. And so I started putting pen to paper, and wouldn't you know it, the way the environment was here on Earth 3.5 billion years ago, you could have evolved the exact same look that the Greys have, but it would have evolved here instead of there, right? So that is before us in time, thus the name of mine, a bit of a spin on that, is the infratempestrial, which is before us or under us in time, if you will. And the thing that I like about my theory, my shameless plug, is that so in my theory, we developed the gray look here on Earth, then the technology to leave. Jury's out. I don't know how that happened, but Masters has the same thing that they left. And now they're just coming back to, check on the deal here on Earth. My theory doesn't require time travel, right? And that's Dr. Masters' theory. And that's, to me, the part of his theory that I don't like. And so, looking at Occam's razor, pretty similar theories, just one evolved one way and one evolved the other. One requires time travel, one doesn't, and one does not. And that's mine, and that's the infratempestrial hypothesis.
Don.
Okay, now, Christopher, I'll say this, that in the years that I've been wading and swimming through this swamp, I've seen an unbelievable amount of fascinating stuff as well as complete, absolute lunacy. Now, part of that goes back to my very early days in the 80s, very early 90s. One of the great bugaboos at that time was the abduction phenomenon. Not only people alleging that entities entered their homes in the middle of the night, the wee hours of the morning, took them away for a while, brought them back, etc. And then on the tail of that, the missing fetus syndrome. Now, at that time, there were two main researchers, Bud Hopkins and Dr. David Jacobs, that were most well known for that. Now, I knew them very well. And we had a doctor out here, a gynecologist, that came to my wife and I and said, I'm very fascinated in this, and there's going to be a point here. I'm very fascinated in this. I would love to interface with Bud Hopkins and Dave Jacobs and get them to send me several of these cases where people are alleging missing fetuses. In other words, when they woke up one morning, they were pregnant. No idea how they got that way. And it went on for, maybe a trimester, and then poof, suddenly gone, like a light being shut off. I can do a lot scientifically with that. Well, they refused him, okay? They refused to work with him in any capacity. So it was as if researchers were padding their account to make sure that nothing upset the apple cart. And then the business about disclosure. Now, in 1995, Roswell was front and center everywhere. We were fast approaching the 50-year anniversary. One of the people that I got on my radio show back then was Representative Stephen Schiff, the New Mexico representative, okay, who was being bombarded day and night from his constituents regarding Roswell. What can you do, Congressman? What can you do? And he ended up asking the GAO to conduct an investigation, not about was it really aliens or anything else, but what do the official military records, the communication records, have to say? And the GAO discovered that a 3-year block of messaging during that time period of the event, the Roswell event, inexplicably vanished. Illegally, by the way. Now, this, Christopher, is where I want to come in to you. We have people alleging, and some with actual physical proof, that they were abducted, they were interfered with in some way, that there were people claiming their fetuses mysteriously vanished. They had criminality going up and down. 2 years ago, during the congressional hearings with David Grush, I'm sure you're up to date on that.
No.
Was asked by one of the representatives, well, has anybody ever been killed in the pursuit of this. And Grush, not surprising to me, but he said, oh yeah, nobody followed up. Criminality has been at the heart of this government concerning the UFO topic. Now, I want to ask you, what, for example, if we get even a partial disclosure and these military intelligence representatives have got to come clean at least to a partial bit? What are the legal ramifications or remedies? What are the legal remedies? Could a class action suit be launched? Lives have been destroyed. People have lost their jobs. People like Paul Benowitz, all right, a civilian scientist that was working on contracts for the Air Force, was disinformed officially by AFOSI people to the point where he was driven into a mental hospital. Who the hell's going to be held to account for any of this?
Sure. Well, not the world's most earth-shattering legal comments here, but if it's the government, no. Will there be any accountability? I doubt it. Who's going to prosecute? I mean, again, the six of us will go around town and we'll be bitching and complaining, and they hosed us and they lied to us. But would anybody actually bring charges against anybody? I doubt it. And also, when you get into,
and why? Why not?
Where would it go? And somebody's always protecting somebody. Somebody. And I don't know all the players. I'm just thinking anecdotally. They come out, hey, yep, we did this. We turn around and go, well, hey, we had some damages because of it. That's civil, and I'll come back to that in your class action question. But on the criminal side, it would have to be, a scenario where the current administration, it comes out now and the current administration goes, oh, geez, yeah, you people, you did all get lied to and it resulted in this and that was criminal, and then instruct the Department of Justice to go after them. This current administration, 3.5 years left, it's one of those, I just don't think anything would ever come of it. Now to your question about a class action. See, that's another thing that I like about civil law is, sure, the government could choose not to prosecute. Well, the six of us can still sue and we can get some information. However, I don't believe a class action would work and I've handled a bunch of class actions in my career. The problem is setting the class, right? It can't just be because now, so say you guys call me up, we want to do a class action. I would want the class to be everyone that was lied to that felt bad about it, because you have to have some damages. You can't just say I got lied to. So we have to have some damages. Okay, so I would want the class to be everyone that got lied to and felt bad, and that's your damage, and it's some sort of negligent infliction of emotional distress argument. They would want the class to be split up. No. First, one part of the class is going to be women who lost a fetus. How many you got? I don't know, 10. That's not big enough for a class. They're all going to have to sue us individually. Okay, next set of damages. Well, this guy went crazy. Okay, well, how many do you got? 50. Not big enough. So it just, and again, and it's a good thought, and I like where you're going with it. Now, and this is one of the hard things in the UFO world, and I always say, yeah, I want the case where a piece of SpaceX or something falls on a guy who's walking down the pier, so I have some actual, some hands-on damages on the thing. But that's not to say, and I lay in bed and think lawyer thoughts, and sure, now an individual civil case for, again, either an intentional or a negligent infliction of emotional distress, it would have to be a good case. But Don, you call me up and you're like, hey, this happened and that happened, and I ended up going into the psych ward and I had these damages and I had these losses. Yeah, I'd probably sit back and I'd look long and hard and start seeing where we could go with that. My marching orders to you probably would be, you're probably never going to see a penny, Don, but I'm in this if you're in this, and let's go see what happens. Again, with my goal being to get information. So yeah, you could bring the civil case, but I was going to mention before, anytime you're dealing with a government of any type, municipality, county, state, city, it's been big in the news lately. It's a little bit different, but immunities, right? It goes back to the old theory, you can't sue the king. So same theory applies. There are things you can sue the government for, but for many, many, many things, they get to say there's discretionary immunity and ministerial immunity. And between those two, they are often so squared away that they're immune, and that there's kind of nothing you can do. So,
okay, let me ask this because I think this is important that they wanted me to bring up. What do you think of the Kessler syndrome?
Yeah, going back to my space debris enjoyment. Yeah, the Kessler syndrome. It's real. It's happening. So what it is, for folks that don't know, there's X amount of space debris, flying around out there. And if people get online and you look at those NASA maps and they show, the space debris, those are only the pieces that they're actually tracking. And I used to have the number off the top of my head, but there are tens of millions of pieces that they can't track because they're too small, right? Paint flecks, which are very damaging at 17,000 miles an hour. So in any case, you got the Kessler syndrome, which is you have all this space debris up there flying around. Well, now one piece hits another piece and it makes 10 pieces. Those 10 then hit another 10, and they told two friends, kind of that thing. And if we were in full-fledged Kessler syndrome, it could get to the point where it becomes unstoppable. And the problem, then, Padre, to your question, we're not going to have to worry about third parties going to space because the space debris problem is going to be so bad you're not getting through. It's crazy. Yes, that is a big issue, is space debris. And we're watching it firsthand. That's the thing. If we saw somebody starting to pollute the ocean, 100 years ago or whatever, maybe we had done something. So we are seeing it in real time, and it's a serious issue.
And then, of course, you have that ugly possibility that you start to take out things like navigation satellites, communication satellites, all the things we've come dependent to. And that domino is exponential. It's not, it's going to have a logarithmic effect going out. And you won't be able to launch immediate things to get into orbit because this thing has to work itself out.
Right. Yeah, and we just saw what the ISS got hit not too long ago.
A couple cracked windows and other stuff that's gone on.
And I believe one of those impacts, the most recent one that caused them big problem, was a fleck of paint. You can't even be tracked on satellite, and a fleck of paint at 17,000 miles an hour damaged the ISS. So it's a bad deal.
I had read that the Chinese were developing an anti-satellite capability that is, for lack of a better description, a flying shotgun shell filled with several thousand, BB-sized.
I wouldn't stop and say that the PRC is the only people that may have possibly developed that.
Well, but to the discussion, you can imagine that it wouldn't take much of an effort to seed the path of enemy satellites with little ball bearings or BBs or something, and you could cause tremendous damage that way. Yeah. Of course, you put your own satellites at risk, but I also understand the Chinese are beginning to plant some in higher orbits to mitigate their vulnerability to that. But no, it's a serious problem.
It definitely is. And I want to ask you this about your outer space. So we see all this junk in space. We're talking about satellites and everything. So as a civil lawyer, all right, so Elon Musk Starlink goes across and something rams into his satellites, right? How do you prove that it's this particular satellite, or how do you say, hey, you damaged my satellite, I want a couple $2 billion, in damages? I mean, there's really no way to take it to trial, right?
Well, there really is. And as you can imagine,
really? Okay.
It is hyper technical. The big, because they could figure out for them, sure, there's some rogue nations, people could be putting up satellites, but 9 times out of 10, in my research, they're able to identify the parties.
How they do that? Because honest to God, Chris, I have no idea how you would be able to identify.
There's quite a surveillance state in space.
Yeah, and they all have, essentially bus routes. It's like we're going to put up our string of satellites. It's going in these exact coordinates at this time, and so everybody knows that that's the UAP crossfire system right there at that time, and everything's registered. So even, and as Commander said, I mean, I'm confident because that's all going to be right in low Earth orbit anyway. So we're not trying to see stuff, 100, whatever. So the technology wise, Chris, I'm not exactly, how they do it, but I know that it's done. But one of the big problems is the jurisdiction, because usually the jurisdiction is tied to the launching country. So we have now built our satellite. Now we all are going to scratch our heads and go, hey, what country do we want to take the satellite to? And so you get a lot of these countries that want to be spacefaring, but they really can't. They don't have the tech, but they can get your satellites up. Well, they're not beholden to any of the treaties. They're just kind of, hey, yeah, we got the satellite. What are you going to do about it? And so if it's a scenario like that, it's like I get called all the time. Oh, his bill collector keeps calling me. Can I sue him? Yeah, but he's like in his mom's basement in Germany. You can, but you can't. Right. So I hope that get enough to your question, Chris.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've got to remember, folks, I'm a ground pounder. I have no idea what flies up in the air.
And Chris, let me just add this. About, I think it was almost 10 years ago, astrophysicist tracked what he believed was a meteorite that went to the ocean. And he wrote a paper up. And it was many, many years later, the Space Force absolutely confirmed that what he had tracked was not a satellite that decayed orbit, because everyone said, no, all you saw was a satellite that came down in the Pacific or wherever it went. I think it was the Pacific Ocean. And Space Force, for whatever reason, just absolutely verified his claims. And then they went and explored, and they found the meteorite on the floor of the ocean and, grabbed samples and stuff out of it. So there's a lot of time spent in the defense intel world tracking everything that's in space and tracking every launch. And that's another reason why the Kessler syndrome is extremely dangerous, because if we do not have the mutual monitoring of each other, it might allow a rogue nation, I don't know, say like a North Korea, because they're always happy rocket hobbyists, launching and not being detected. So for what that's worth.
Right. And I agree with you, Commander. And one of you had referenced, Chris, the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs.
Yeah, I want to know what they do. That's interesting.
You can do a whole bunch of shows on it. It's very interesting. There's been addendums since, but there are 5 primary treaties of outer space. And it's not legalese. They're short. And you could go pull those treaties. You could read them all in an hour, and you will see. You'll get to paragraph 1. You go, wait a minute. We're not supposed to mine on the moon per this treaty. Isn't that what everybody's talking about? Mine on the moon? Huh? That's bad. Huh? We're also not supposed to be allowing space debris into. So the treaties are already there. But for folks that don't know, in international law, one of the big problems is, there's these treaties and they're toothless. So everyone gets together at the UN and they go, all the spacefaring countries sign on to this thing. It's really just aspirational in nature. So that's one of the problems with these rogue countries. They could plausibly deny it and go, well, it's a shit worthless treaty anyway, and we're going to do whatever we want. And the treaties exist and you guys are doing whatever you want. So they'd be right to a certain extent. The treaties, the 5 primaries are really being kind of overlooked.
And I apologize, but I'm just laughing to myself because I'm saying, if this outer space affairs thing really takes off, where you get a lot of lawyers involved in the space law, I could just see, the ambulance chasers becoming satellite chasers. Sure. I mean, you're going to get these guys coming in that are going to start suing, countries or whatever. I don't know, Chris. Is that something that you think it's going to happen? Is this the thing going to explode?
Is that a pun, Chris? Bruno?
What's that?
Sorry, never mind.
It was a pun. I mean, nothing against lawyers. Well, a little bit. But, I mean, Chris, you have ambulance chasers out there. And I can see that some guys are going to say, wow, this is a moneymaker. I'm going to...
For all the legal jurisprudence members of the audience that make their living out of that type of law. We don't mean that in the worst possible sense. Chris Johnston, I turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, thanks. Chris, I doubt it, because it is especially when you handle cases on contingency. I mean, a case like that would be tremendously expensive. So you have to have the right case to offset it. But Don, kind of back to your question, I had this thought, and I didn't ramp anything up on it, but I just read a couple of months ago, and this isn't the first or the last time, where a plane could not take off because one of the SpaceX rockets had exploded, right? So this plane had to sit on the runway for X number of hours to let this clear. So my lawyer mind, there's a case for you, Don. I got some actual damages. I got people stuck on an airplane. They had, their time's worth X amount. And the reason it happened, the one and only reason, is because this blew up. Hey, Elon, you owe my guys. So something like that.
An act of God, huh?
No, it was not. He was negligent somehow. I'll figure it out. But
okay, I rest my case. How's that?
Show me the accident. I'll show you the sum.
I like that. Never mind. Chris, listen, I got a question in the chat here, and I want to ask you before we go to break and stuff. Who has jurisdiction over resources in the asteroid belt? There's a lot of money to be made there.
Yep, great question. And I would say go read the outer space treaties. Like I said, I can't speak specifically to the asteroid belt, but there is a section in there about mining. And nobody is supposed to do it. And so I don't know if that would apply, again, specifically to the asteroid belt as well. And if it didn't, boy, would that ever start getting interesting, talking about parsing things out. But technically, no, it's one of those tragedy of the commons. No one but everyone has jurisdiction over it. But we technically are not supposed to be mining it. So I suppose the UN kind of jurisdiction.
Actually, anybody that's got the means to get there. Well, if they can get there, they can thumb their nose at everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep. All right. With that, we are going to go to break, and we'll be back with our guest, Christopher Johnston, and more on lawyers in outer space. And then the Roswell thing. We got to get into the Roswell the next hour. All right. We'll be right back. And we are back with our guest tonight, Chris Johnston, talking about the Roswell crash. We're going to get into the Roswell crash now and how he made an actual case. Now, this is fascinating because everybody here has written, read books on the Roswell incident. We've talked to people who investigated the Roswell incident. But this gentleman is an expert trial lawyer, and he actually put a book together from the opening statements all the way through, and he wanted the reader to look at it through the eyes of a juror and to see, is it true or not true? And so, Chris, I'm going to ask you this, and then we'll go round robin again.
Sure.
But how would you make an opening statement to this Roswell book? You actually mentioned in your bio that you did everything from start to finish as a trial, and you opened up with a statement. Can you talk up a little bit about the statement, or give us the statement?
Sure. Well, I'd rather not give us, it's a couple pages long, but I think more procedurally, which might be a little dull, but maybe people don't know this. So opening statements for a trial are not supposed to be persuasive. So you attempt as the attorney to be as persuasive as you possibly can, but you will get called out on it every time. Opening statements are rather dry, and a lot of times there will be facts. The only thing you're allowed to talk about in opening statements are facts that you believe you're going to prove during the course of the trial. Okay. And then it's in closing, because closings are actually called closing arguments. That's where you get to go all kind of crazy, and you get to, be the big hero you think in your own head, and this is going to do it. So closings are really the big exciting for the lawyers anyway. That's kind of the fun part. Openings tend to be fairly dry. And some of the facts are going to be in both parties' openings, because the reality is, in some circumstances, you actually have to work with the other lawyer because if it's contentious, the judge doesn't want Commander going nutso and he doesn't want Chris going, so it'll be like, you got to agree to, the basics. So I set that up in the Roswell book as trying to rely only on the facts. What are the facts that we know? I believe that a fact is July 1947, something crashed, right? That's
right. We can all agree on that.
Right. We could say the fact Mac Brazel found some, the fact that, and you sort of just walk through the facts without a bunch of sugar, and at the end, we believe that you will, agree with the believers that this was indeed an extraterrestrial craft, so I know they're not particularly sexy and they're not really how they are on TV necessarily, but that's how they go.
Okay, so your opening statement would just give nothing but the facts. Say, hey, we believe something crashed at Roswell. We believe that there were bodies there of unknown origin. We believe that, Mac Brazel found this stuff on such and such a date and such a time. And we believe that the stuff that we found is not of this earth. Am I got that right?
Yeah, that's unfortunately, that is about the
That's
line.
pretty dry. I gotta tell you, it's pretty dry.
They are dry, and you can't use exhibits in your opening. There's exceptions, but so again, the image of what happens in an opening doesn't really match reality. Where you get into kind of polishing a little bit of persuasion would be, and you're going to hear from Mr. Mac Brazel. He's lived in this area, so you can, again, they're all facts, but they're facts that, of course, are building them up in the jury that this is just a good local guy doing his thing. In the defense would be doing the other side. You're going to hear from the most highly decorated General Roger, and so so you will hear bits of persuasion there, but not overt.
Essentially, Commander.
So, Chris, I need you to tell me how you view some of the counter evidence that's been put forward. We know that there was a balloon reconnaissance operation that was going on at Roswell. How do you balance out these other facts or other evidence that's presented as fact?
Sure. So throughout, you clearly would mean like throughout the trial, right? And for example, and I know it wasn't exactly on point, Commander, I apologize, but going back, the alien bodies, I think that's kind of an easy one, right? So, or easier, where, as the believers, we would be saying, we would call Glenn Dennis to the stand. We would say, the fact that you have progress, that a big seal, coffin. As the plaintiff lawyer, I would probably get as far as you end up delivering those coffins. Well, no, I didn't. I'd probably end there, because when you have a really bad fact, or it doesn't have to be really bad, you want to get out in front of them as the lawyer, right? Because it's one thing for me to say to a friendly witness like Glenn Dennis, and, oh, by the way, did you take those? Did you manage to get the coffins there? No, I didn't. I had to order them. Okay, thanks. Versus, and isn't it true, Mr. Dennis, that you didn't even take the coffins out to the base, right? So it really is just on that case-by-case basis. And so when you're putting your trial together, you're always looking for the impeaching evidence. And as I said early on, so much easier from the defense standpoint. A classic one that it kind of comes up a lot. So Major Jesse Marcel, right? And on the one hand, and I like Marcel, and I think he's credible, but from the lawyer's standpoint, we heard all about following orders, you got to follow orders, this, that, and the other thing. Okay, well, I can get all that. And they use that as the kind of the justification on the second photograph. Oh, that wasn't the stuff that was found, but he took that picture because he was following orders. All right. So when the orders came in, did the orders include taking some of the debris to your house and showing it to your family? Well, right. And you start going after, so maybe this guy doesn't follow orders, all the time, like he likes us to believe. So, and again, it's just point by point and case by case. General Ramey, for example, he's kind of a tough one. Always seemed like a stoic guy. The interviews that I read, he's, kind of a hardcore guy. But he sort of owned it as a mistake, right? And people make mistakes, but then you turn that around and go, so You want us all to believe that one of the highest ranking guys in the military just got an experience says the only nuclear.
Chris, is your mic working okay?
Yeah, it seems to be. Am I
Okay, now it is.
Yeah.
Fading
Sorry.
in and out. It's fading in and out.
Yeah, I guess the NSA finally got to the show tonight.
They're a little late.
Normally they block me out. I have a special affinity for their attentions.
You know, and on the bodies, and I think it was Don talking about, you know, that would be also an easy impeachment point against the skeptics if they want to rely on the bodies being the dummies that weren't even in use until 4-6 years after the fact. So again, and I'm sorry I'm not being more direct for you, Commander, but it really is that case by case. Give me the piece of evidence, give me the witness, and how do you attack? I mean, there's always a way, and some are a lot more effective than others, but you got to go after any cracks you got.
One small follow-up, and then I got to turn it over to my co-host because Don and Dan and Chris are really the pros here. But the newspaper behind me, Roswell Daily Record, flying saucer, the term that was used, all that stuff out. Your opinion as a researcher as well as the lawyer, was this an intentional deception to throw this in there and then retract it? Did the truth come out first and then the retraction, or was it intentionally trying to cover other things that were going on by using this emerging discussion point in the late 40s?
Sure. I think the truth came out first. So I think the headline behind you is correct. That's what I think. And then I think the retraction came out just as a holy crap, as CYA, and let's hoard this technology. But so I don't think that they just ran with it, but I know it sounds almost exactly like there's an article in the New York Times a couple months ago where the CIA, they were copping to it. It would be this exact scenario where what they had said, for people that didn't read it, yeah, there was a time or two that we planted stories, but more often than not, we just didn't interfere when there was a story going and we knew the truth. They would let society go with that.
So, Chris, I'm sorry, I kind of fibbed. I have one more follow-on to that. Okay. So here is the site of our atomic delivery capability that was successfully deployed. Unbelievable layers of security. Why would they have slipped out the truth this way? Why, when I look at the timeline of events and the type of secrecy and the layers of additional atomic energy control that was in play, why would this have slipped out this way?
Well, in my real job, there is, first let me back it up. So people are at least familiar with the concept of hearsay. And what the legal definition of hearsay is, it's an out-of-court statement offered to assert the truth of the matter, okay? And you're not allowed to do it. We can talk about some of the congressional hearings, lots of hearsay, that kind of thing. However, there are exceptions to hearsay. And one is, and I think what might have come into play here is what's called an excited utterance, right? Something happens, Chris gets in some horrible accident, I'm at the scene, and he tells me something. I can now, and then he dies. Sorry, Chris. So now I'm in court, and I want to say,
my life.
And I want to say, hey, Chris DiPerno told me this. I can't say that unless I lay proper foundation that, hey, I approached the scene, and it was horrible, and this was going on, and that was going on, and I was talking to Chris, and he was all jammed up, and he was sweating, and blah, blah, blah. And then he said, and then he told me, I've now laid foundation for an excited utterance. So it's enough of an acknowledged issue that the courts have been dealing with that for, going all the way back to jolly old England. So
wait, hold on for 1 second, Chris, and I'm sorry to interrupt you on that, but don't you have to tell him he's dying first?
No.
Okay.
No.
I always thought that you, in order for a dying declaration of something, you had to.
Those are different.
Okay.
Dying declarations and excited utterances are different.
Gotcha.
So, but yes, in the dying declaration, and I kick that around some because a lot of the late in life testimony, that came out from various sources about Roswell. I tend not to like testimony that comes in that late, but again, that's been considered, these deathbed confessions. Well, the courts have dealt with it and said, hey, dying declarations can be an exception to hearsay. So again, for me to be consistent, I accept that as well. So, but I think what's going on behind Commander's head, I think it was an excited utterance. I don't think they had a process in place. I think people were losing their minds, and that's what came out. And then cooler heads prevailed, like they always do, right? You get a day, you step back, oh shit, we got it. And then you can make some more rational decisions. And I think that's when they decided to retract the correct story.
Padre.
A couple of questions, and pardon my ignorance of the law on this matter. But let us suppose that a UAP were to crash into my backyard this evening. Is that UAP then mine? I mean, what is the right of ownership? It could even apply to, say, a piece of a meteor or something. If it lands on my land and it's from space, is it mine?
I would say that if it was a craft, it wouldn't be yours. That would be no different than I'm driving home and I lose control and I bail out at the last second. My car crashes through your fence and now my car's in your yard. Well, it's still mine. And I think the same thing would apply. Now, of course, we'd have to prove who owned the ground, but whoever, and again, pick a planet, pick anywhere that you want. Whoever the rightful owner of that is now, could they come and claim it? That would be, maybe worth the price of admission. But from a pure ownership standpoint, I don't believe you would own that disc. It would still be the property of the rightful owner, whoever that is.
But am I not within my rights? They've had an intergalactic breakdown. The beings are outside the craft and they're checking the oil or something like that. And I walk. Am I not within my rights to initiate first contact, or do I have to wait for police or some other higher authority to do that?
That's a really interesting question, because that's something that just pisses me off personally. Who gets to determine, first contact, and we're going to send this representative or that? Bullshit. I'm with you. They're in my yard. I'm going up and I'm talking whoever I want and doing whatever I want because it's in my yard. Now, let's say the aliens aren't walking around. Would you be within your rights to haul said aircraft into your garage and keep it closed in there? Yeah, that I think you could. No one would have any more right to it than you, other than the rightful owner. Right? But yeah, there's stories in it that might even be addressed in one of the treaties on this first contact business. And that's one of those, what's anybody going to do? Hey, Padre, talk to the aliens first. Well, okay, right?
Yeah. I know him. His name is Steve. There was a really cute movie that came out
and they didn't eat you either. So
there was a really cute movie that came out in 2023 starring Ben Kingsley called Jules. And it's about that issue. A UAP crashes in his backyard, and he develops a relationship with an injured alien who he takes in and, gives first aid to. And of course, the government, they want that. And he's saying, no, this is my friend. He's sitting on the couch watching game shows with me. And it's really a fun little movie if you haven't seen it. And so that got me thinking about that as to, what rights does an actual property owner have to something that comes to him without necessarily him or her, inviting, but a relationship develops. And then after the fact, authorities come and say, hey, we hear you've got an alien in your living room watching game shows. No, I don't think, do you get in trouble if you lie to authorities about that?
I suppose ultimately, yeah, you lied to the authority, lying to the FBI. So yeah, could they charge you for something? Sure. Would I still probably do it? Yeah. And again, it kind of goes back to Commander's question and the whole excited utterance thing. I honestly, none of us could probably even imagine if this really happens. And now Padre's watching game shows with the alien. People would be losing their minds, and any processes that were purported to exist will probably go right out the window because they're watching TV at Padre's house.
The only other question I had from a legal standpoint here, and it pertains to your book, you chose to approach this as a civil case rather than a criminal case. And why did you make that decision?
because I'm a civil trial lawyer, and in my 25 years, I've done 2 criminal cases for 2 friends of mine that had too much to drink. That's okay. It's you know, you wouldn't hire me for a criminal case no more than you'd hire a plumber to do your electric.
But how's it different? How is it different procedurally as to how you would pursue it?
Well, procedurally, I mean, the most basic thing, the size of the jury, right? In a civil trial, it varies by jurisdiction, but it's 6 to 8, you know, and most criminal jurisdictions still require the 12. So there's that. The rules of evidence are the same. The order would be different for me because, again, going back to that burden of proof, the prosecutors have that. So that case, they have something, you know, that they have to prove. You know, honestly, the main one, I love my job as a civil lawyer. The things I've been involved with are just nutso. And I've handled a lot of wrongful death cases, but I'm not hanging around with the murderers. And that in criminal defense is a very, very important job. It's hugely important, but it is just not my bag. And if we go to trial, Padre, you've got a case and we go to trial and we lose, we're going to feel real bad. You don't owe me any money. I'm out some money for costs and we part as friends. We go to court for a criminal case, we lose. Your freedom is at stake. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a high burden on those criminal defense guys, and it just never appealed to me.
Okay, thank you.
Don.
Okay, I've spent well over 35 years thinking about this. You know, initially when I became involved, I didn't think much beyond the possible technology, machinery, and even entities that may in fact be flying these things around. But the time frame we're talking about, 1947, is just very shortly 2 years after the end of the most horrific warfare human beings are aware of. We went literally at the beginning of the war, starting with actual horse cavalry. Now, I'm talking about the United States. We had actual horse cavalry. And within 4 years, we were dropping atomic weapons. The technology leap is unimaginable. Now, this embargo hold for release document I read to you basically stated June 24th, 1997. Now, how many of you realize what significance that date, June the 24th, is? Do any of you know? Mm-hmm. Nobody?
No.
Kenneth Arnold sighting, 1947, June the 24th, just before Roswell. Now, I wondered if that fit into this, but we're talking about something that earth-shaking changes underwent, Christopher, and I'm sure you're, at least peripherally, you're aware of a lot of this, but when Roswell, I just wrote a paper about a year ago on the whole disclosure thing, and I documented in that paper that when this event happened, 3 earth-shaking events occurred. Number one, the Air Force, the United States Air Force, suddenly broke away from the United States Army, became its own service institution, and they immediately took charge of this overall UFO question. Number two, even at the height of the Second World War, we didn't have a mainline intelligence agency. Suddenly, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, popped into existence. And then most ominously, the National Security Act was signed into law, which can include premeditated murder if it's believed a national security problem is evident. Now, that makes me think about things like David Grush. You're aware of anybody ever dying? Yeah. the way people slough this off, there's so much more here than if you just take 5 minutes and think about it. Now, Christopher, where do you come down on all of this? Do you look beyond the civil, possibly litigation or those things to encompass a much larger picture of what this may, in fact, be all about?
Personally, yes, I do. From a research standpoint, I dig into those things that are most interesting. Like everybody, you pick things up through osmosis, right? And so I do find that also a pretty amazing technology gap. However, in my, UFO work and writings, I haven't, I just don't see the facts or the source material there necessarily, that I haven't really dove into that. But another thing, when you talk about the timing, that is very interesting. And it kind of goes back to Commander's question about the retraction. Post-World War II, I don't know the polls, but I have to imagine pro-U.S. government fervor was at an all-time high, right? The war just ended, happy days are here again, the economy's coming back, and people wanted to believe our government, right? So the first one comes out, the second one comes out. I think that's why initially, back in 47, there wasn't the pushback that one might expect. So from that timing perspective, and just other than agreeing with you, incredible technology gap, and it certainly raises some flags, right? To kind of, hey, maybe a guy wants to look over here, but it's never been an area that I've dug into, so I can't really speak too intelligently about it.
Well, when you stop and you think about this, 1947, we, at that point, broke the sound barrier. Okay, Chuck Yeager in the glamorous Glennis. Am I correct there, Commander?
Well, in your version of history, that is correct. Right airplane. There's a very strong case that a civilian contract pilot actually broke it before that. I would refer people to Chasing the Demon, written by a good friend of mine. But one of those two gentlemen most likely broke the speed of sound. Now, right around that time in 47.
When we look at the facts surrounding that, all right, when did we first achieve a mechanical means of flight? 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright. And within 13, 14, 15 years, the beginning of World War I, do you know American military officers the Wrights offered to make that available, and they could not see a benefit in an airplane flying up in the sky during war? I was stunned when I read that. But at any rate, Europeans are shooting each other out of the sky, first starting with pistols, then rifles, finally machine guns. Another 10 years, we have mail delivery going around the globe thanks to the aircraft. The late 1930s, World War II is on the horizon. And in 1939, the Brits are fooling around with jet engines. Then the Germans, okay, they come up with the ME-262. I mean, the technology was mind-boggling. And then, 1961, President Kennedy stated that it was his goal to send human beings to the moon and return them safely before the decade was out. And by God, we did that, 1969. And then suddenly, gentlemen, it basically all stopped in 1972 with Apollo 17. We had technological leaps and bounds that were beyond comprehension going up into space, and suddenly we stepped back. Have you ever wondered why? Well, I have, and I did a lot of research into that, and I think, and this is the part that a lot of people don't want to consider, but yeah, they're here. They've been here a long time, and they very likely have a base on the far side of the moon. Well, that's all I have for now.
What do you think about that, Chris?
Possible. You know, when I think that whole, base on the far side of the moon, that was, something that I never was really on board with. I heard it like everybody else. I don't know. But boy, what kind of brought me back around was the, I don't know if it's alleged, but I am a lawyer, the alleged ringing of the moon when it was, when they discharged the lunar module for, one of you four will know this, one of you five. Anyway, when we were leaving the moon and the discharge unit went down and it struck the moon allegedly rang like a bell for an hour. All right, have you guys heard this?
Oh my God, yeah. And more than that, they did it again, and it rang for 3 hours.
Yeah, I hear that, and I start thinking, what the hell is going on with this? And that simple fact, I'll take that one at face value, given the sources that, I believe I read it out of NASA. So if I'm to believe that, boy, that is very curious to me. And what does that mean is on the dark side of the moon or inside the moon? Because, again, I know something about astrobiology. I don't think the Earth is going to ring, right, if we smash it with something big enough. So, yeah, that is a crazy one. And I don't know that I like the idea. I accept the idea that it's possible. But I also try to be very open-minded. Who am I? Who am I to cast aspersions on somebody else's theory or ideas, especially when they're well researched, they're well thought out. You arrive at this, great. The other guy might arrive at that, and who knows? And I think that is important as long as we can talk about it. But I think a lot of the problems in our country, you think that and I think that, I hate you. Can't we just, hey, let's talk about it, why and just agree to disagree. But I don't know that I would even disagree with that one, Don.
Well, I've been involved in some very in-depth research, and I would simply say my suggestion is I wouldn't discard the baby with the bathwater. There's a hell of a lot to consider about the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And what is more familiar to us, okay, right here on planet Earth than the moon? It's always been there as far as, my entire life, your entire life, it's always been there. It's friendly. It's, take walks with your loved ones in the moonlight, that kind of thing. And maybe it's not quite as benign as we really thought it was. I discovered back in the early to mid 90s, I don't know if you're aware of this, and when I announced this, boy, I'll tell you, I got a lot of flack until they discovered that I was correct. The astronauts went to the moon carrying firearms. Did you know that?
I have heard that.
Well, it's true. And I got public relations from UFO Magazine, my wife and I, to admit to it. They had 45 caliber automatic pistols when they went to the moon. And when I asked them why, well, if they're coming back from the moon and something happens and, they crash down in a jungle, they've got to have a means to defend themselves. And I said, crash down in a jungle? They land in the ocean. All of Apollo, everything was in the ocean. And they had no coherent answer for that.
I can give you a coherent answer about crashing in the jungle. It's landing in the ocean was not a guarantee, not in those beginning shots. That's why the ocean was used, because it's such a large target area. It would have been very easy to end up landing on a landmass.
But you couldn't use a 1911 in space.
Yes, you can.
No,
Sure
you shoot it. The equal opposite reaction in an almost zero G environment is going to send you to Venus.
It still would fire.
Well, it would fire, but you would.
And
go
we're talking
the
about
other way.
on the moon, which has 1/6 of gravity. So you wouldn't go to Venus. You might end up in the next crater. So let's.
I mean,
Point of order, Chris, if you could hit your gavel since you're in the. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you about that, Chris. There.
And,
Hey,
and
I got a
Chris,
question.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
Before we venture off, Catherine in our audience, one of our great super listeners, she did pose a really great question, and I wanted to just stick it in for just a quick couple minutes of lightness. Elon Musk put the car in space with the astronaut. Are you prepared to take the case if that collides with something? Because I see that being a really interesting combination of terrestrial vehicle in orbit, delivered by space vehicle, and then, all the jurisdictional issues of the collision with whatever is there.
I would love to take that case. Yes. So if anyone hears that case, I prepared. I probably think I am, but boy, it would be the first of its kind, which would be about, the coolest thing in my career, Frank.
I'm sorry, Christopher.
Of the moon, I got a quick question here. The reference to mining on the moon.
Yeah.
What gives anyone the right to do that? I mean, is this kind of like the old days of colonizing, where first person who gets there plants their flag and
Helium-3 gives them the right.
The what does?
Helium-3.
Oh, okay. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think that it's a good question and a good point. First of all, as I've kind of hammered, nobody's supposed to be doing it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And again, when there's no ramifications, so yeah, it's who planted their flag first. So at the same time, so now let's say that China's up there and they're mining. Now this is start getting interesting. We go up, we're going to start mining. Okay, well, where's the property lines?
Exactly.
I go right up to your Chinese flag, right, and start planting this, which, as we talk it through, is probably one of the very reasons you're not supposed to be mining on the moon, because it's going to lead to terrestrial war because we're, infringing on your space up there, right? So, yeah, it's a great thinker, and that's, just, property rights we talk about on Earth. You might hear the phrase, it's a bundle of sticks, right? And you pull it from one end, and it's always, the same on the other end. But without that in place, okay, here's a thinker, you guys. So this would be like a bunch of lawyers sitting around the bar.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
You're talking about the alcohol bar, not the bar where you guys get your pasta.
Correct. And so we're now at the alcohol bar, and I hit on this big idea, which I've never had before. Honestly, your rights in your house, your property, they go from the center of the earth to infinity, okay, like a tube over your house, unless you've sold the mineral rights or they've been otherwise retained. Okay, so then does that tell me that when the moon is orbiting and now it's in my tube, right, of Johnston's house here in Iowa, do I temporarily have the right to that property, if you will? And that is, again, lawyer side, that's a really interesting question, because the moon, it's in my area of my property right. So for that, however long it would be there, a split second, do I have the right to do something at that point in its orbit?
So what's your deer rifle caliber there, Christopher?
So Chris, would that apply in that theory? Does that apply when an aircraft passes over your house?
I was just saying that, yeah.
Well, there's easements, and just like there is on the city has an easement for its sidewalk in your house. So I am far from an expert on easements in air travel, but I know that they exist, and they're actually granted kind of back and forth. So you can't do anything about it. But again, the moon doesn't have an easement, right, for my space. And the flip side of that question is, if the moon passes over and now it's over Chris's tube of property rights, can I do something? All right, the flip side is, what if China's up there and they're mining and now it goes through my property and they're mining? Is China violating my rights for that split second window in time? And I don't have the answers, but this is what, the guys at Lloyd's, you're brilliant. These are the thought processes, right? So it's pretty incredible.
Well, Chris Johnston, I want to swing back to Don Eckers. thought process. Let's say we have alien presence on the moon.
Yep.
Does the reverse work? When they're pointing down at the Earth over that, could they say, with the intergalactic court?
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting? Hey, I got these rights on the moon, and now the Earth is going through it, and so now you're interfering with my rights. Yeah, let's go to the galactic court. Sure, that argument again. That would
and
be.
You be willing to do the intergalactic court? I suspect that you would probably get the kitchen pass from the missus and jump that.
Okay, true story, guys. This actually happened to me when I was starting out in my TV weather career. I used to be a TV meteorologist in Minneapolis. This was back when the first satellite pictures were being shown of the U.S. and the animated clouds moving across it. My station, the CBS affiliate there, had the first on TV motion satellite picture. And we had a woman in the Twin Cities call us and threaten to sue because from space we were showing an image of America, including the state of Minnesota, and she was in that picture, and we didn't have her permission for her to be on TV. Now, case was thrown up, but Chris, how would you approach that case?
Okay, well, first of all, if that lady called me, I wouldn't take her case. I was just doing that today. How to say get off the phone without saying get off the phone. Because the issue with that is reasonable expectation of privacy. And that's a well-established law. You're cruising. It's like the Google traffic cameras now. Tough shit. You don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy walking down the sidewalk, going to the mall, or really anywhere. And Dan, you might find this interesting. So I'm from the city. So you're on CCO?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. So in Minnesota, they just had a case about 10 years ago. Does someone have a reasonable right of privacy in their fish house? Right, they're out ice fishing, and they're schweeling and doing their thing. And the game wardens came, and they opened the door. And I believe, I don't live there anymore, but I believe the courts came back and said you don't have a reasonable right of privacy in an ice fishing house. So there's a good Minnesota case for you. So that lady would be, and people they don't know, so that's why they call, right? So I should show some grace, but I would tell her the whole reasonable expectation of privacy. If you don't like it, take it up with your legislature. Have a nice day.
And for those of you who may not be familiar, in Minnesota, it freezes so hard on the lakes that they actually set up towns of ice fishing houses on lakes with streets and street names, and you can arrange to have your mail delivered to your ice house. And you can put like a satellite dish on your ice house. You can have a little kitchen in there. You can actually live on a lake for about 3 months out of the year in Minnesota. So I'm sure there's a lot of law that deals with ice houses.
Yep.
Where would you go to the bathroom?
Well, you drill a hole in the ice.
Okay. All right.
Or you just go outside, just hop around the corner.
Okay. Hey, I got a question for you, Chris.
Yes,
so, getting back to your book. All right. So I'm on the opposite side of the table, and you're trying to explain about Roswell, and I turn around and to the jury I go, well, jurors, members of the jury, there was a top secret project, was called Project Mogul. And what they saw wasn't really a space aircraft. It never happened. We were testing the thing. And here's our evidence right here. We have balsa wood. We have parts of a balloon that was taken from the crash field. We did have a balloon crash there. And here's General so-and-so saying that there was a project like that. This is what we're doing. How do you counteract that? Because here you got physical evidence. You have a high-ranking general or somebody like testifying that there was, in fact, a project. There's documentation that there was a project. And how do you counteract that?
Sure. Well, on that, I would start dialing down, and I'd start going, okay, let's talk about these balloon flights, right? When did they go and where did they go from? Because although this didn't make it into my book, but if we were there doing it, because the government, I believe it was flight number 4 of Project Mogul that they tried to tie the Roswell debris to, is flight number 4. Well, funny enough, flight number 4 did not go on the day that it was supposed to go. It was actually, I believe it was delayed by about a week. So I'd get you set up and I'd be like, and you got these flights, and you say that it's flight number 4. Yeah, that's right. And I know I'd have them pinned down because that's been said. And so I'd cross you with whatever. And it was flight number 4. Yep, it was flight number 4. And then I'd say, okay. And then I'd pull out the material. Well, flight number 4 didn't go till X date. So how could it have been flight number 4? Right. So now you're starting to kind of crumble there. You get into, in Project Mogul was only, my understanding, only partially classified. The government likes to say, oh, nobody knew shit about it because it was classified. Oh, not so fast. It was only partially classified. So I'd have you on the stand committing to flight number 4, and I'd get you. I'd have you on the stand and you'd be explaining that it's classified, and I'd get you. I'd have you on the stand, and, the physical, now, chain of custody on, if we actually had physical evidence, that would just be awesome. But there would also be an angle on that. If you're up there with bogus stuff, right? And so now Jesse Marcel would be here, because if we have the evidence, he can be alive. Okay, Major Marcel, is this the material? Well, no. So now you on the skeptic side, and you're just going, Project Mogul, weather balloon, nothing to see here. Well, I've now hit you 3 times, undercutting your position.
Yeah, that's a good challenge. That's really good. Now I got my second question for you is, we talked earlier about time travelers, yeah, and that Michael Masters. Do you adhere to Michael Masters' theory? Do you think that's a reasonable theory?
Yeah. Absolutely a reasonable theory. I just think my theory's better.
Okay, so here's what I've been told. Whether it's true or not, I don't have the evidence to show it. However, the person that told me this is credible, and also a person that probably is in the know. So he says that when they recovered bodies from the Roswell crash, they found that they were organic in nature, like a plant. That they were thinking that this thing is not developed like a human's developed. It's actually grown. So it's an organic type of thing, that their digestive system is actually done through their skin, that they take protein and absorb it through the skin, and they excrete their stuff through the skin. And there have been people who've had encounters who have said, hey, listen, they stink like hell, and stuff, where there's been an odor and stuff of that nature. Now, with that being said, how could they be time travelers if they're grown? I mean, let's just take that as a theory. But as Michael Masters says, well, they're us. I don't see us going from the stage where we developed into something of that type of nature. Do you, Chris?
No, I don't.
I mean, just look at how we've developed through the years. I mean, I don't see that.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of my comment about 3.5 billion years ago on Earth. Folks watch TV and we're hearing about, ancient Egypt. And I'm like, big deal. Right. 5,000 years. Who cares? Let's go back to where it was really cool. And we've had all this time that things could have developed. Now, we could have had a billion-year-long civilization. Say it went 3.5 to 2.5. You get 3 billion, or you get a billion years for something to develop. We have no concept of what we're going to look like. But Chris, one thing that I think is really interesting about that, kind of the new, seems to me, the new flavor of the month phrase for extraterrestrials. We heard it in the congressional hearings, the non-human biologics, right? Mm-hmm. Your description lends some credence to that specific word choice. And again, just a little thinking note, because I hadn't thought it till you said it. But, it's one thing, there can certainly be a difference between an extraterrestrial alien, right, and a non-human biologic. I mean, a piece of moss is non-human biologic. And so it's interesting that the level of commitment that we've got, if you can even call it that, is, well, non-human biology. Okay. All right. So again, maybe it's just word choice. Maybe there's something in there.
Right. The reason I say that is that people who have been abducted and they've had partial memories come back have said, yes, I was examined by grays. I had grays around me, but there's also another species. They've also said that there were people that we considered like the Nordics or the Palladians or something, the Arcturians, something of that nature that's always somewhere in the background with these grays. It's like the grays are worker bees that they develop, and they do all the manual labor of that kind of a thing and stuff. So I'm a little skeptical about Michael Masters' thing, because as a time traveler, let's say you're a time traveler and you know something very horrific is going to happen. And let's take Adolf Hitler. And so wouldn't somebody who says, hey, I'm a time traveler, I'm going to go back in time and try to stop 6 million people from being exterminated?
You would hope. Yeah, you'd hope.
Yeah.
I got this question, a similar type of question the other day. And the only thing that I can equate it to, and again, this is going to be clear in a second, only for me personally, right, is that, so I was born and raised Catholic.
Right. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. Right. I'm just trying to say.
You're not at all. I'm just saying, I believe we have free will. Everything's preordained, and we have free will, but we're going to do moronic things, right? I believe that an extraterrestrial, they wouldn't interfere. I would see it more in that aspect of like, here's what's going on, what's happening down here. But I really don't know or think that they would interfere. Whatever their reason for being there, whatever our reason for being here, I don't know of a reason that they would stop a nuclear war, stop Hitler. Now, they might not, hopefully they wouldn't like it, but I don't think they would. And again, that's just kind of rooted in how I see that little bit more ethereal ethics, if you will. Right.
And my last question to you is, do you feel there's a spiritual component to this?
I don't. I think that extraterrestrials are just that. Now, I also don't believe that extraterrestrials and a traditional God or what have you, they're not mutually exclusive, right? It's not saying, oh, you can one or the other. I'm like, oh, bullshit. Who says God didn't, he made us, then he made the alien, so I don't really, but I see.
In my house, there's several rooms. Yeah.
I see extraterrestrials no different than just another species or, race of folks that are out there with that necessarily, not a spiritual component, not for me.
Okay. Commander.
So you have a new project coming out.
I do.
What is the intergalactic legal beagle aiming for?
That one is, so I'm doing a whole series of the Truths on Trial, and the next one I'm doing, it's probably halfway done, is crop circles.
Oh, that's
any brief that you can give us ahead of time of what we're talking about there?
No, it'll be, kind of your most of the concepts and most of the theories of crop circles, and also trying to work it through history, kind of from the very early ones to the more current, by calling witnesses, to lay out the narrative, just like this one. The nice thing about the crop circles, and I'd like to mention in my book, all the witnesses obviously are real people, and about 99% of the testimony that is written in here was not made up by me. It was taken from previous interviews, previous articles, previous affidavits made by those witnesses. And so that's, that's a very serious task, to stand on top of all that. Whereas in the crop circles, the information will all be correct and be based on reports and whatnot. But this time I am just making up my witnesses, and I will take a little more liberty, a little more creative license, while still, maintaining the direct and cross aspect of both sides of it.
This stuff.
Should
Padre,
be a
go
very
ahead.
interesting
Oh, sorry.
read. I'm looking forward to the analysis.
Oh, good.
Okay, legal question for you. And this is on behalf of, we have people who watch and listen to this program who are experiencers who have been abducted. The aliens are just, there's disclosure. It's admitted that they're here. And race comes and says, you know, the Greys work for us. What legal remedy do abductees have against the Greys, now that we know they exist, as far as compensation for the pain, the injuries, the psychological trauma? Because we don't have diplomatic relations with them yet. There's no intergalactic treaty. Wouldn't they be subject to the laws of the places where they commit the crime?
The first, and kind of the boring answer, the first thing I would need to know is, what is our definition of works for? Right?
Well, yeah.
Because are they drawing a paycheck? Do they get all the typical stuff? Because there's a legal theory then called respondent superior. So if the Greys are working, right, for the U.S. government and they are doing these things, again, thinking civil, not criminal necessarily, but then via respondent superior, you could theoretically get to the government for compensation for that. But even if they were drawing a paycheck, what we're going to be told is they don't work for us, or they are just a third-party vendor, but they're responsible for themselves, but they're contracted to us. So you'd be stuck trying to pursue a claim against the aliens, and who knows how they think about that, or if they have insurance, or what the case is. But yeah, and I feel bad, and this happens a lot in my real job too. You get these good questions, and I feel like there's just this negative, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. But when you're dealing with topics like this and world governments and U.S. governments, it's just simply the unfortunate reality in a lot of these circumstances that there isn't a lot someone can do.
What if said Greys and or their employers, owners, whatever, produce some paperwork that says we have a license to operate from some world government? We made a deal with your government. Now what happens?
Honestly, if they went to the extent of having a license and some paperwork, okay, so we're going to pick on Don, and Don, you're the alien, and I'm the country of Greece, and I'm going to hire you. You're a contractor, and you've got these licenses and everything. And the first paragraph in our agreement is going to be an indemnity clause saying, oh, and by the way, any shit happens, it's not Greece, it's Don.
Well, you're going to have a hell of a hard time catching me in my spaceship.
Well, listen, we only got a couple minutes more. Don, why don't you ask the last question?
Well, to tell you the truth, I honestly can't think of anything. I would just simply say that I fear, and have for quite a while, that when we shed this mortal coil that we all inhabit, I fear we're not going to know a heck of a lot more than we do right now. And that's basically my take on it. But then, hey, I'm a bit cynical about this.
Not you, buddy.
Nah.
No. Let me ask you this, Chris, before we wrap up the show. So, in your book, do you feel you make a strong case that Roswell was real, or do you see holes in it that even you can't fill? Sounds like you defended it pretty damn well when I asked you.
Yeah, I ultimately, and I mentioned it earlier, I intentionally picked witnesses who weren't extreme. I think I did a good job at presenting a very even approach to it, and then the readers can decide. And that was my goal. So to say, so on the one hand, yes, I did present a good case for the believers. On the other hand, I presented a good case for the skeptics. Right. And so that's what makes a good book. You go, oh, yeah, this, sure. Wait a minute, that. So, yeah, so I think both arguments, both sides are good, and there's good impeachment of both witnesses, and there's a lot of interesting trial procedure as well.
Have you ever thought of doing a documentary where two lawyers go at it over this?
Huh.
I have, and I'm not going to name names, but I heard about 2 weeks ago that is already in the works, not including me, but somebody else.
That's too bad, because I think you'd be perfect for something like that, to have an actual civil trial going on in regards to this.
Yeah, I pitched it to MUFON. They just their convention's going on right now.
It's just over with.
Okay, just ended. So, but I was a little late to the game, but I pitched to them. I was like, hey, I will show up, and I'll bring my partner with me, a couple other lawyers, and we'll put it together as a mock trial. But there wasn't time. So if anybody's ever interested, I'll go anywhere and do that. And talk.
I think it's a great idea to do that. All right. Well, you know what? The show is over. Chris, thank you so much for being part of this show. I really appreciate it. I think you did a great job defending
Absolutely.
Roswell. And it's interesting what you brought up about outer space law for people like me, and they hadn't a clue that the UN did it. This was very intriguing. All right, folks. Well, that's the show for this week. Thank Don the Padre Carlson, of course, Commander Cobra, and Dandy Don Eckert. And, of course, our special guest for tonight, Chris Johnston. Good night, everybody.